Good afternoon. We are proud to have with us today at the Black Chronicle newspaper. We're celebrating Black History Month, and we have one-on-one with us today. Grace Franklin, how are you doing, Grace?
Fabulous. How are
Great,
you?
Grace, doing wonderful because you're here. And Grace, we wanted to talk to you a little bit about. Of course, we know about you, and thank you for coming.
Hmm.
But could you tell our viewers and listeners a little bit about Grace Franklin?
Oh, yeah. First, thank you for having me. So I'm born, raised Oklahoma City. Um, Graduated from Millwood High School. I have to say it all the time. I went to school at Lincoln. Child of the East Side, and all of the various and rich history that involves, and the people. Um, I am an artist. I am a social justice activist. Um, and I just try to move in the world so so people don't forget the culture of blackness and the importance of it themselves. So that's what I do. That's me.
With that being said, when did you realize that was something that meant that drives you? Seems like I've watched you for a long time, and specifically the last 10 years, Grace.
Hmm.
Uh, Pro right and pro black is something. It seems like it is in your DNA.
Yeah, I think I find it because I get saddened when we don't see ourselves. And it makes me say, wait a minute, y'all. Don't forget who we are, what we are, all the things we are. We're not a monolith. Black people always say we're not a monolith, and we're not. We're also a culture. We're also in the fight every day, and we have to be present, and we have to have a voice at the table. And, I got tired of sitting back talking about it and not doing anything about it. And one day somebody was like, well, why don't you just? And I was like, well, I will. And so that's pretty much how I was more vocal and more so in the public eye because when you sit back and you see people representing us that you love, that you agree with, but then sometimes there's a voice that you don't hear. There's an opinion that's not being said that is also reflective of our community. And those opinions have to be heard as well. So I just wanted to make sure that we're fully represented, that we are fully understood, um, and that we're reflected in every way.
So you mentioned a very nice dialogue of you being engaged. Tell us about your upbringing, your background. I think that starts at home. Doesn't that start at home?
It does.
Consciousness.
It does. I think so. So, my mother and father married 50 years. My father, William Franklin, um, he, my father is a very smart man, and he was a man that taught us how to think. You need to think, and in order to think, you have to read. In order to strategize, you have to know what can happen. And many times, what can happen has happened before. Very much so, very much so a history book person and a thinking person. I think my father, he used to say that I didn't talk much when I was younger, and then all of a sudden I started talking and I wouldn't stop. And and, and he would always say to me, before you start speaking, think. Think about what you're going to say. Think about what you mean. Make sure you're saying what you mean. Um, he was very much so in the community. He was a trustee at his church at Quail. Um, he worked for FAA. He worked in for the state as a mediator. So he was always in spaces where he was many times the only black man, and my father was always a black man, always. So that was wonderful. And my mother is a community person as well. She was the branch director at the YWCA McFarland branch. So I've always been in the community. It's always been about service. It's always been about understanding that what I have, everybody doesn't have. And it also doesn't mean that just because you have differently, you treat people differently. You've got to understand that community help is helping the entire community. And we don't forget people. And there is also an expectation for you as a person. So I think that at home, Black history, Black art. My father was one of the board members for Black Incorporated. It was important. I remember us having artists from the continent, from like Kenya and Tanzania at the house, which would be hilarious because, you know, we're kids. They don't tell you that's about to happen. You just come home and people are drumming in the living room. And it's like, what? then, so very much so exposed to art. I think my parents were very purposeful in making sure that we traveled. One of the benefits of growing up in our house was that we took trips. We went to New York, went to California. My father was from Cincinnati, so we went there. We would go to Chicago. We would go. So there would be places where there are large populations of Black people and different types of Black culture. And I love that I grew up on the East Side. You know, my school, my high school, my elementary school, just how my community was, it made me love my community because everything was here. You know, Mr. Graham was down at the drugstore. Mr. Clark, Dr. Clark was my dentist when I was a child. I had Black doctors. I had Black professionals. I had everything we needed. And my childhood growing up, it was really beautiful. Now, it was tiring as a kid going all this stuff now. But
well, let's talk about Northeast Oklahoma City. For those tuning in, we're celebrating Black History Month. Thank you again for coming. There's a reason and a cause you're here. And it's based off the work. It's based off your work. You have just started. You're too young to say you put in a body of work. You just started your work.
I ain't put nothing
in. You mentioned Northeast Oklahoma City. You mentioned Dr. Graham with his pharmacy and your dentist and things like that. One thing that Blacks have fought forever is for equality, integration for equality. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Then you look at Northeast Oklahoma City. Let's talk about the Commerce area. I've seen many times that you have been an advocate or a proponent or an ask, or you want to be able to buy a certain type of coffee at a grocery store. Right?
Yeah.
I've seen you post that.
Yes. Yeah. I because, you know, it is absurd that we did not have a store over here. It has been ridiculous that I have to go across town to get a good avocado. I want a mango. I want delicious coffee and cheeses. I want those things in every community. If it's in that community, why isn't it in this one? And then they make up these things about, well, they're not going to buy that. Black people don't buy that. If I drive all the way over to the other side of town to buy it, that means I'll buy it here.
But what are those who say, yeah, you would be driving over there, but your numbers, your rooftops, there's not enough people to support that. The people who would like to see Northeast Oklahoma City grow and do well in commerce, the business people say there are not enough rooftops, meaning not enough people living here. What is your answer to that?
I would say there's enough people living here to support stores in Midwest City. There's enough people here to support stores on the south side and the northwest side. Why wouldn't there be enough people to support stores in the community of the east side of Oklahoma City? Midwest City is one of, I dare not say the name of the store, but that store is fantastic. And every time I go in there, I see everybody from the east side. And I'm like, what is this? And the baskets are filled with many things.
Well, and now we have the beautiful homeland.
Yeah, I'm excited. Yeah. But I will tell you what was very strange. Saw the homeland, went into the homeland, was like, yay. There were a few things that weren't there at the homeland that I was one of those people like, why aren't there?
Sure they'll get there.
But the next time I went in there, it was there.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, that felt great. But I had to remember the homeland was there. Wow. I remember driving. I just needed some like eggs and, just a little something. And I was driving where I normally have been going for the past, at least decade to get. Then I was like, wait, let me turn around and go to homeland because we've been deprived of it so long. it took a second for me to, okay, wait, let me make sure. Even the community store on 23rd, I passed it to go get something somewhere else. And I was like, wait a minute, let me go here and get it. And it was in there. Because we're so used to not having here and going somewhere else to get it that I had to remind myself, nah, I get it right over here. And
No, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, and I love the people that work in there. I think the most hilarious thing I've seen, I pulled out a card to pay for the food, didn't go through, used the wrong card. The girl at the register said, okay, sis, it didn't go through. Okay, you got another card. I was cracking up. I was like, I sure do.
I think we've all been there.
I think, she was just like, okay, it didn't go through. But Homeland is great.
Grace, you gave us a snapshot of your background, growing up, two dynamic parents, advocates, stakeholders in the community. We're Black History Month.
Mm-hmm.
We're honoring, recognizing Miss Claire Looper,
mm-hmm.
a icon in the city, state, and nation.
Mm-hmm.
She is Oklahoma's daughter who led the civil rights movement. She created the foundation and the blueprint of how to protest nonviolently.
Mm-hmm.
She made change. We're all benefiting from her fight and the others who support her. And you, Grace Franklin, you're Claire Looper's civil rights daughter. You picked up the mantle. You are for the cause. I realize, Grace, that you have taken. You said that you were about doing and not talking, action for right. I saw you in the hose cloth case, a police officer who was found guilty of raping a number of African American women, Black women. Tell me, first of all, how did you get involved with that? And secondly, how did you decide that you were going to be a voice of right?
I think with the Holtzclaw case, it was really a conversation. I think we all have conversations when we see something on the news and it's like, what happened? What? And it's concerning. It's alarming. And all I could think when I was talking to a friend of mine, Candace, was he's going to get off. They're not going to hold him accountable. They're not going to fully investigate because these are Black women from economically difficult backgrounds who have some contact with the justice system, whose background is not as squeaky clean or as palpable as other people. And they're not going to care. They're not going to believe them. And my first thought was, I'm tired. I'm tired of that. I'm tired of people thinking Black women are disposable, of thinking that our community doesn't love all Black women, because we do. We are, everybody in our family. Everybody has somebody in the family who's had a couple of trials. It doesn't change your love for your aunt or your sister or your mother. And they use that. Sometimes society uses that to throw Black women away, to say we're not worth anything. And it was so dangerous. The thought of an officer targeting women who he knew people wouldn't believe, that's dangerous. And escalating sexual violence leads to death. A lot of women are killed after they are sexually assaulted. And what he was doing, how he was doing it, he was going to kill somebody. And I just wanted us to rise up and support them. I didn't want to look up and a year later say, hey, I wonder what happened with that police officer and he got off and still has his job. And we never heard anything about it. So I think I called some friends, some like-minded artists, and we all talked about it. And we decided to go down to the actual county jail. So that was the first time we showed up. It was like 5 or 6 of us. 2 of my friends, Kamaye and her husband, CJ, brought their children. So the babies were out there. And we And we just wanted to make the noise. We wanted people to know that we see this. We're not letting it go. He's going to have to stay in jail. Although he did get out on a lesser bond, which is a whole nother issue. But we wanted to fight for those women. And I wanted to say, yeah, we're not going to do this. We're not going to allow this. We as a community will not. And people showed up. People showed up.
It was
now.
5 or 6 the first time. When people start showing up, what's the largest you think you got to?
I think around the county courthouse, we counted about 250. That's around the county courthouse when we were walking around there, and the threats came down from upstairs. I think Jay Wiggins got where one of the sheriffs came down and told us we're disrupting and they're gonna put a cease and desist and we're gonna get arrested. And all I could think in that moment when he was saying that was, okay, well, you're gonna have to write it. The judge is gonna have to sign the order. And they never did because it was a threat. It was a mission of intimidation to make us move. So be it. I know the law. We don't have to move until the judge signs it. And no judge is going to sign it. Well, I was hoping because I didn't have any bail money. I was like, if you sign it, we got to go, y'all. We got to go. We got to get ready.
Interesting that we're having this discussion today because Host Squad was last week denied an appeal.
Yeah. So he had a appeal, I think a year ago with the second criminal district. He had an appeal for his original conviction and he lost that. In that appeal, he said it was a circus environment. He said that we were intimidating the jury, which was absolutely not true. Because purposefully, when the jury came out, we would move. We would do things so you couldn't say we were interrupting the trial. He tried to come before the board of parole, the parole board, because of some shenanigans, and they denied it. You don't get to circumvent the law, sir. You have to follow it. There's an appeals process. You tried it. It failed. You have to go through that appeals process again. You can't just, I want to do the parole board, which is another example of privilege. Another example of when you have certain money and you look a certain way, that you try to finagle or finesse the legal system to get out of, paying for what you did.
Did you know any of those ladies prior to you getting involved?
Interestingly enough, I didn't. I didn't know any of those women. I was actually working somewhere. We were trying to get the rallies together, so I was at the office sliding the little flyers to the black folks on the table, like, hey. And I slid a flyer to a young woman that I knew from the job. We would laugh, and she told me, we were outside, and she said, that's my mother. I said, who's your mother? And one of Janie Liggins' daughters. I worked with her, and I didn't know. I didn't know that. So it wasn't that I knew them, because I didn't know them at all. That was my only connection, was when I realized one of her younger daughter worked with me. It was because when they showed Miss Liggins on TV, I was like, wow, that could have been my aunt or my sister. That could have been my mother. Where they were, that could have been anybody in my family. And we can't have it. We just can't.
You did that based off of being right. You eloquently stated about it could have been anyone just there. Mm-hmm. Since that, you have been recognized, Grace, by the community, by the city, by others as a leader. I know that people contact you for different reasons. Is there a different cause that you find yourself? One thing I do know about you, Grace, is that you are pro-black, but you're pro-humanity. Mm-hmm. I know that you love people, mm-hmm. regardless of race, color.
Yeah.
But what's the next cause for you? What are you doing?
I was on the mayor's de-escalation task force in the community, which is a smaller group. So my next thing is going to be making sure that all the time that many people in the community spend on that board and the recommendations that were given, that they actually implement them. Because there were some great recommendations, and there was a lot of dialogue, shall we say, in those meetings, and it was difficult. It was difficult for many leaders to sit on that committee with the FOP, with the Oklahoma City Police Department, with people who have been adversarial to other people that were there, and we worked through that. We worked through that to get to a point where we could have some suggestions, some declarations that could make this city better. So the next thing is to make sure that those things happen. Also, I want to have more visible art programs for kids. I grew up. I think I mentioned Black Incorporated before. When I grew up, Black Incorporated was listen. We had all the workshops. I think I've seen people in plays where it was a mess. Next thing you know, you on stage like, what is happening? What is going on? But it's important. It's important to make sure that we have those things available for kids in the community to see something else. I think hip hop and singing and dancing is great, but you have to see all elements of it. You need to see all the art. Even if you sit there and you're thinking, what is happening? I don't understand this. It still expands your mind and expands your palate. So that's another thing I'm really interested in for youth.
Well, who has inspired you? I mean, you are from a local, national, state level. Who's inspired you doing what you're doing?
Oh, locally, probably artistically, one of the biggest influences on my life was Albert Bostic. No doubt.
That doesn't surprise
Hands
me.
down. And I mean, listen, he still is. If I have a question, I ask him
He's
still.
still around.
Absolutely.
Oh, wow.
I'm gonna get talked to crazy a little bit before I ask, but but I'm gonna ask him because he's a wealth of knowledge, and so he was definitely one. Another inspiration that I always think about are the business owners that I know, which is kind of weird. I think about Florence's. I think about like every stylist I know. You know what I mean? That's still out here working and doing business, and the entrepreneurs. I very much so admire that. That you come out, you make your own business, you make your own money. One of my friends who inspires me is Kaya Pennington. Kaya Pennington, she's one of the owners at Kindred. She did own Urban Roots, and now she's a culinary arts teacher at Metro Tech. So she's doing what she loves. Those people who do what they love all day, every day, inspire me because they love it. And I want to do it.
From a social justice movement, who inspires
I mean, when I think of just watching people move, Clara Looper was definitely one. Thelma Parks was a big influence on me. Even educators that I had growing up, Miss Washington, big one.
Miss Alma Washington.
Alma Washington, yes.
One of the original 13.
Was she? Interesting. Didn't know that. I didn't know that. So, and who else? Just my own parents. I have to say that. And a lot of people in church. So although I do not attend now, when I was younger, that activism was also inspiring for me. So Sylvia Lewis, huge, very much so. She used to work with me on my orator skills. I could run, like if I had a speech or something, I could say it in front of her, and she would help me with that. Day to day, just everybody who was a leader in this community, who did it well.
Well, you know, with all people have its ups, downs, and in betweens.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Something on just a totally different topic. You mentioned a lot of people that inspired you. Al Bostic, I remember your dad. I remember you mentioned Mr. Franklin, William Franklin. But one thing that I thought was very interesting of this short moment that you've given us is that a lot of your inspiration, people that you admired, were women of color. Very consistent with that. And when you hear women of color, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Okay, so now we're gonna have this conversation. So I think women of color is the term can be an erasure, because I name black women. Black women are influential to me. When I hear women of color, what I think about is all the women of color. So black women, indigenous women, Hispanic women, Latin women, Afro-Latin women. You know, I think about all the women of color. But for me, black women is specific, just because it's, I think it's because it's me. And I think it's important that we say women of color to be inclusive, because we have to include, because there are very shared experiences with women of color. And there are women who may, in phenotype, present as black, but they may be something else. They may have a Latin history. They may be biracial. They may be multiracial. That's important, to include and be inclusive. And it's also important to be specific. It's also important to say, I think sometimes when I've been speaking at events for women of color, that it's important that we give visibility when we say women of color. So that there are some things that black American women struggle with, that will be familiar to African American people who immigrated from Africa and are now integrating into our culture, but still have African culture. There is a immigrant story that we don't have, but they have. And we have to allow room for that in the blackness. You know what I mean? But they do have the shared experience of being a black woman moving through this world or America, we can all share. It is, I think the term women of color is a rich term, and it makes me think of everybody. It really does. But always in the back of my mind, I think of black women. I always been thinking about black women.
We want to say thank you. It's Black History Month. Thank you for taking time to come on one-on-one. We look forward to profiling you in the upcoming newspaper edition. And Grace, as always, we expect to see you in many, many fronts. Art, justice, education.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Thanks again for coming.
Thank you.